as hard as. Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. We are learning Maseches Chagigah Daf Yomi. I have a question for the tzibur as to what we should do. So Tuesday we're supposed to finish the Masechta Miras Hashem and the entire Seder, which is very exciting. So this is Sunday we're doing Chaf. Monday we're doing Chav Vav. I can do Daf Yomi on Tuesday, short shiur from 8:40 till about 8:50. There's only a quarter of a page of Gemara. We can totally do that, or we can finish the Masechta tomorrow night. I'm all for doing the kviyas of everyone coming out just to finish. Have everyone here. We'll do a little rikud and then we'll be done. That's fine. It's fine by me. You guys let me know what you think.
What happens Tuesday night?
Learn Torah on your own. Do chazar. Can't start your vamos. I'd rather start your vamos on time because people are.
Instead of davening, have Thursday night and Shabbos, do a block Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah, the only we could. That's a possibility also. I thought about that too. Michael was a fan of that one when we last spoke about it.
I just want to skip your day.
But otherwise, Tuesday's
I'm not here.
It's all about the Yomi.
It's all about the Yomi. So when we can come in and do the 10 minutes. It's either that. The Siyum is going to be Friday night here in Shul. What? I don't know yet. I don't know. I'm waiting to hear back. Well, we dafka wanted to do with all the families. And also Rabbi Robinson highlighted that because it's the week before Purim, it's also a little easier, one less thing to do. But this is what we wanted to do in brachos. Is to have it.
After it makes no sense to do this Shabbos. He's up 5 days to prepare for it.
Because he's not in
That's what
town.
he said. I don't know. We all know Mark's angle. We got it.
No, but it makes sense to do it the next week.
Whatever.
It really does. That's like.
Could be.
Ending Thursday night, whatever.
Could be. Okay, keep the feedback coming. We're starting at the Mishnah on the bottom of Chav Daled Amud Beis. Yesterday's Gemara, Rabosai. Yesterday's Gemara was one of the harder Gemaras. Tonight is going to be a little bit of an easier Gemara. Let us get started. The Mishnah writes, Chomer b'truma. Even though we just spent the last Mishnah and the last many blot highlighting some of the stringencies that apply to Kodesh over Truma, there are some stringencies that apply to Truma. What are those stringencies? Sheba Yehuda, we know that Eretz Yisrael was broken up into sections. There was Yehuda and there was Galil. So then in regards to Yehuda and not the Galil, Ne'eman and Amei Haaretz are believed, Al Taras Yain V'Shemen Kol Yamos Hashana, that when it comes to Kodesh, when it comes to that higher level, we do believe Amei Haaretz in regards to the status of purity of wine and oil throughout the entire year. And when it came to the season of the year, when they were pressing olives and grapes, then we would also believe the Am Haaretz for Truma. So this is the Chumrah. The Chumrah is that we only trusted an Am Haaretz when it came to Truma, if it was during the season when they were normally pressing olives and grapes. Otherwise, we did not trust it. That's the Chumrah. Says the Gemara, Avru hagitos v'habadim. If that season of pressing olives and grapes passed, v'heviu lo chavis shel yain shel truma, and v'heviu lo chavis shel yain shel truma, and an am haaretz brought you as a gift. They're an am haaretz, and they're bringing you something that is oil and wine, but it's not during the season of pressing. So then lo yikablenu mimenu. Then we're not even allowed to receive it. Thank you for coming for Shabbos. I know you wanted to bring me a bottle of wine. I'm not allowed to accept your gift because you're an Am Haaretz. And this is not during a season where we press grapes, so therefore I cannot accept it. Aval, what can the Am Haaretz do? The Am Haaretz knows that there is a time of year that for Truma, that even with this Chumrah of our Mishnah, that limits us from utilizing Truma from an Am Haaretz unless it's the time of pressing the olives and the grapes. So says the Gemara, tell them to use that rule. Just wait until next year. And when it turns the time of year where it's time to press grapes and press olives, then we'll trust you again. Aval, Menicha Lagas Haba, you're allowed to wait until the next time we have the pressing of olives and grapes. What if the Am Haaretz says, V'im Omar Lo, Hifrashti Lasocha Revi's Kodesh, that remember our Mishnah made a distinction that we have a Chumrah by Truma, that we trust an Am Haaretz by Kodesh, but when it comes to Truma, we only trust him in the time of the year when they're actually pressing the olives and the grapes. So says the Gemara, what if he says, yeah, it's mostly Truma, but I put in one Revis of Kodesh? Do we then trust him? It's not during the time of the pressing of the olives and the grapes. So do we have the Chumrah of the Truma overriding, or do we have the Ne'emanus of the Kodesh overriding? So the Gemara says, Ne'eman, bottom line of Chav Daled Amud Beis, we do trust the Am Haaretz to say anything about Kodesh, we always trust him. Next part of the Mishnah, last line of Chav Daled Amud Beis, Kade Yayin, the Kade Shemen, what about pitchers of wine and pitchers of oil, hamidumaos, which have a mixture of chulin in them. Rashi says at the top, Mefarish B'Gemara, we'll see what's going on there. So in regards to this meduma, where there's a mixture of chulin and something else, either kodesh or truma, ne'emanin aleihem b'shas hagitos v'habadim, we do trust the Am Haaretz when they are during the time of the year when they're pressing olives and grapes. That is in fact the case. And as well, we also trust them, the kodem legitos shivim yom. We also trust them for the 70 days prior to the time of year that we actually do the pressing. And we'll learn a little bit more about this shortly. The Gemara on the top of Chav Hei Amud Aleph, 3 lines down, starts with a question picking up on something that I foreshadowed already about why does it only say in the part of Israel that's Yehuda? Why not the Galil? Why do we say that this only applies in one section, that we only trust the Amei Haaretz in Yehuda, but not in the Galil? Were there different Amaratzim? Were the Amaratzim and Yehuda more knowledgeable than the ones in Galil? So the Gemara, gives a beautiful response, an unfortunate one, but one that we can probably appreciate in line with some of the modern lay of the land. The Gemara says, "Yehuda inu v'Galil lo." We only rely on the Am Haaretz who lives in Yehuda, but not in the Galil. My taima, Amar Reish Lakish mipnei shiratzua shel kusim mafsekes beinehem, because there's a strip of land where non-Jews live. It's Eretz Ha'amim, and non-Jews when they own the land, we have a chumra derabanan that Rashi highlights here. Take a look at Rashi, 3 lines down. Dibur Hamaschel Ritzua. Rashi says this piece of land that's owned by the kusim is begeder shel Eretz Ha'amim mafsekes bein Galil Yehuda. There's a strip of land that cuts across Eretz Yisrael back in the day that separated the Galil from Yehuda. And the problem was, Rashi says, Yerushalayim bi-Yehudahi. Yerushalayim is in Yehuda, not in the Galil. V'efshar lehavi an Yerushalayim b'tahara. There was no way you logistically could not get to Eretz Yisrael without going through this piece of land of the Kusim. And because it cut the whole country, it was a band straight across the country. And because that was true, you weren't able to get wine and oil from the Galil into Yerushalayim without going through that land. And says Rashi, Lefi shegazru chachamim, 5th line of Rashi, shegazru chachamim tuma al eretz ha'amim, and the afilu shel chaverim shemigalil eino bal nesachet. Even if you're a big Talmud Chacham and you live in the Galil, logistically, there was no way to route around this little strip of land. And it was a big problem. So that's what happened. At that time in our history, anyone who lived in the Galil could not give anything for Kodesh into the Beis HaMikdash. They were stuck. The Gemara seems to say that there was no possible way of doing that. That's what the Gemara seems to say. There was no other route. You had to go this way. I don't know. You have to figure it out. Maybe the ports were.
Where's the demarcation line?
No, it's just a question of practical. It's not a line of demarcation. It's just practical. We don't know how big that strip was. Maybe it was above where the water started. It's possible that it was north, like Lebanon, and like further up where there's no Mediterranean Sea. Certainly, whatever the answer is that logistically it was impossible. Even to go roundabout, you couldn't do it. And maybe it was like C-shaped. I don't know. Okay. Right. We don't know exactly. We have to look I didn't look in the Rishonim, but I'm sure some of the Rishonim discussed this. But Lamaisa, we didn't trust the fact that anyone was able to get from the Galil to Yehuda. That's why our Mishnah distinguishes and says that it's only mutter for Yehuda to trust in Am Haaretz, but not
just the area around Yerushalayim, or was it bigger than that?
It's not the area of Yerushalayim per se. It's north. We're talking about the northern half of Eretz Yisrael, the northern third of the Galil. But we don't know what it looked like then. We don't know what it looked like. We don't know where on the map we're talking about. What was Galil back in the day? It could have been everything north. We don't know. We have to look on a map and see. And whatever the case is, the Gemara didn't like it. So the Gemara says, why don't we solve this problem another way? The Gemara says 5 lines down, V'nisve b'sheda tivo migdal, put him inside a box. Put this person with his oil and with his wine from Galil, put him in a chariot, lock him in so that it's its own rishus, and run straight through the strip of land that's Eretz Ha'amim, the land of the Kusim. What's the big deal? Block him off from all the tumah that's in Eretz Ha'amim. So says the Gemara, that's not allowed. Money? Whose idea? Why would we not be able to do that? Our Mishnah is Rebbe. What does Rebbe say? And this is a very important idea. We discussed this in Maseches Shabbos, I believe. The Gemara says, the Amar, Ohel Zaruk Lav Shmei Ohel. If you have an Ohel and it's portable and you put someone in it and it's in its own enclosed space, he says Lav Shmei Ohel. Rebbe holds that once that thing is in motion, you no longer have the status of an oil. The Tanya, the Brisa writes as follows, and this is a Brisa that wasn't talking about our sugya, but seems to apply perfectly. Says the Gemara as follows, 6 lines down on Chaf Hamid Aleph. The Tanya, hanichnas eretz ha'amim b'sheda tevo migdal. Let's say that a person is inside a box, some type of container that seals them off from the world around them, and they're going through Eretz Ha'amin. They're going through a non-Jewish land, which has a status midrabanan of Eretz Ha'amin of Tuma. So if you're in the box, does that protect you from the Tuma? Rebbe says no, mitame. That ruins everything. That's Rebbe Lishitasa, like we just saw. Our Mishnah, which says that only Yehuda, we rely on the Am Haaretz from Yehuda, but not from the Galil, that has to be according to Rebbe, because Rebbe says that Ohel Zaruk Lav Shmei Ohel, and like he says in this brisa, that being inside a closed container does not stop the tumah. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Mitaher, says the Gemara. I have another idea. We know from the pasuk in Chumash, Kol Asher Ein Samid Pasil Alav Tamehu, that if you have an earthenware vessel and it has a seal on the top, what's the status of everything inside? Good to go, even from Tumas Meis. So why, says the Gemara, tell everyone in the Galil, we know that you guys have to go through the land of the Kusim and that there's a Tumas Eretz Ha'amim Midrabanan. We know. Take your wine and oil that you want to dedicate to the Beis HaMikdash, pour it into an earthenware jug and seal it, and then walk wherever you want. Even Tumas Meis can't permeate an earthenware sealed vessel. So why don't we recommend that? Why don't we just say that, the people who live up in the Galil, you guys have a solution. Just take everything in earthenware vessels and seal them. The Gemara says we can't do that. Why not? Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Shonen, we have a brisa. Ein hektish nitzol b'tzamid psil. We have a chumrah, seemingly a chumrah, that even though it's true that tumas meis cannot permeate an earthenware vessel, but when it comes to hektish, we're more strict. Says the Gemara, you seem to have the language wrong. Third of the way down on Chaf Hamid Aleph Latanya, the Brisa writes, Ein chatas nitzeles betzamid psil. It's not about hektish, it's about a chatas. My lav hakodesh nitzel, and maybe the Brisa that says chatas leaves room to infer that yes, you're right that a chatas, that higher level, talking about the Efer para and the Efer chatas, maybe that is very sensitive to tuma, but that's the highest level of tuma susceptibility. But maybe when it comes to kodesh, my love kodesh, then maybe if it's kodesh then nitzol, then maybe the earthenware vessel will in fact protect us. In which case we have a great solution to our problem of Galil going through the Kusim, which is Eretz Ha'amim, and into Yerushalayim. We have a great solution. Says the Gemara, lo, you made the incorrect inference. The only thing that can be protected from Tuman Eretz Ha'amim in an earthenware vessel is water that will be used for the chatas that is not yet holy water, just regular water. That's all that will be covered. Says the Gemara, but we know that our friends up in the Galil, that they were medachen, that they did purify things. They were metaher, the wine. They were very careful with it and the oil. Why would they be doing that if they can't even bring it to Shalayim? If what you're saying is that the logistics are impossible, that's what the Gemara presumes. If you're saying the logistics are impossible to get from the Galil into Yerushalayim without going through Eretz Ha'amim, and therefore there's a Gzera D'Rabbanan of Tuma in that land, so why was everyone in the Galil just stockpiling wine and oil for the Beis HaMikdash? So the Gemara answers because they had a good ashkafa. Says the Gemara, big Galila manichin. They weren't carrying it with them. They left it in the Galil. Eliyahu via Taharena. Beautiful approach. It's like packing the suitcase, knowing that Mashiach will be imminently coming. At this time, they had the barrels ready to go. Yeah, but the Beis HaMikdash will come soon. Okay, but you can't get there. I know, but soon we'll be able to get there. So what they did is they took all the barrels and they made their wine and they made their oil and they made a kadosh. And they're right. Whenever Mashiach comes, we'll go fine. He'll tell us, but we're stockpiling in the meantime. Beautiful. Just a beautiful approach in the Gemara. He'll tell us where to walk. He'll tell us exactly where to go. Or other Meforshim say he'll tell us. He'll make sure that the Eretz Ha'amim is not located there so we can walk with purity. That brings us to the 2 dots halfway down on Chaf Hei Amud Aleph.
All between Galil and Yerushalayim is all not Eretz Ha'amim.
Not now, but at that time, the Gemara says at the top of the Amud that there was a band. It's a couple lines into the Gemara. So Rish Lakish said that there's Ritzua Shel Kusim Maseches Beinei. Yeah.
But that was just like at the time of the Nevi'im. Like when was that?
This has to be at the times of the Beis HaMikdash. One of the Batei Mikdash. It has to be.
We're still waiting to his presence.
Still waiting. Hopefully with a similar fervor.
Nissan Nigal.
Yeah,
I
Nissan
heard that
Nigal.
like so many times.
We've had a lot of Nissans. The question is, why hasn't it happened yet? The Gemara does say that.
My computer's in the box. Nissan.
Relax. All right, says the Gemara. This was the lenient side of our Mishnah, where we said that we do trust the opinion of an Am Haaretz during the time of pressing of olives and grapes. Says the Gemara, that doesn't seem to be true because Uraminhu, our Mishnah, doesn't agree with another source in the Tanaim. What does it say there? Says the Gemara, Hagomer Zesav, someone who finishes pressing their olives, Yeshayir Kupa Achas V'Yitznena Le'ene Kohen. Machlokas in the gears here, the one that makes most sense and the one that's found in Kisvei Yad is Le'ene Kohen. You have to leave it for the Kohen to make sure that it's tahor, meaning we don't fully trust the Am Haaretz. Our Mishnah says you trust the Am Haaretz. This new brisa says we don't. Which one is it? Some Rav Nachman Okasha Becharfi HaBe'afli. One is talking about Becharfi, which is when you do the pressing at a normal time of year. That's when we trust the Am Haaretz. But Habe'afli, when a person is doing a later harvest and they're pressing grapes or olives later than the normal season, then we don't trust the Am Haaretz on his own and we need a Kohen to verify. Amar le Rav Adabar Ava Kigon Mai. What is an example of a family? Who is an example of someone who does the olive presses late? Says the Gemara, Ke Osan Shal Beis Avich. Your own father does that. He was talking to Rav Adabar Ava that he does a very late press, and there we don't trust the Am Haaretz. There we need a Kohen. Now Rav Yosef gave another answer to this stira. We had our stira. Our Mishnah says we trust in Am Haaretz, and this brisa says we don't fully trust him. Rav Yosef Amar, no, maybe it's Begalil Shanu. Maybe it's that when it's in the Galil, there we don't have Yerushalayim, we don't have Yehuda, and there's the Ritzuas, there's the piece of land that's Ke'eretz Ha'amim of the Kusim. So maybe that's the distinction. Is that our Mishnah when it says that we trust them, that's in Yehuda. But where do we not trust them? That's in the Galil. So says the Gemara, I'm not sure that's going to work according to everyone. We're 7 lines from the bottom on Chav Hamad Aleph and Esvei. Abaye has a question on this answer of Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef wanted to say that our Mishnah and the Brisa are different in that one's talking about Yehud and one's talking about Galil. So says the Gemara, hold on one second. Abaye says that Ever HaYarden v'Galil Harehe Kin Yehuda. Hare Hain Ki Yehuda, that these locations of Ever HaYarden and the Galil are like Yehuda as it relates to this din. So how can you say that we make a distinction between the Galil and Yehuda? They have the same halachic din. And not only that, but the Brisa continues, Ne'emonin al hayayin b'shas hayayin v'al hashemen b'shas hashemen. We trust an Am Haaretz in all of these locales, whether it's if in the time of pressing great olives for oil if you're pressing wine in the time of pressing wine, then we trust Am Haaretz. And at the same time that he steps on olives, he presses olives, we trust him there too. Where don't we trust an Am Haaretz, says the Brisa? They weren't actually done in the same exact season. So if you're a month off and you were doing olives during grape season or grapes during olive season, we didn't trust you. But what we saw earlier on in this Brisa says that according to Abaye, the Galil and Yehuda are the same. So how then can Rav Yosef say that the Mishnah is talking about Yehuda while the Brisa is talking about the Galil? Says the Gemara, Ela Machvarta, 3 lines from the bottom. You're absolutely correct. We have to go back to our first answer, Kiddushanin and Meikara. We go back with the first answer of how we resolve the conflict of our Mishnah in the new Brisa by saying Habacharfi Ha Be'afli. Is that when our Brisa says we trust on Am Haaretz, that's when you are in the right season. You're doing the pressing of the olives or grapes in the right time. However, if you do them late, then we need a Kohen to verify that it's actually kosher. That brings us to 3 lines before the bottom of the page, first long line. Says the Gemara, we had said in our Mishnah that Avru Hagitos ve'abadim meviu lo chavis shel yain lo yikablenu hemena aval manicha legasaba. We had said that if an Am Haaretz gives you truma in the wrong time, outside of the time of the olive press or the grape press, the halacha is you're not allowed to be makabel it from him. You're not allowed to take it from him. Aval manicha legasaba. What you're allowed to do is you are allowed to save, the Am Haaretz is allowed to save it for the next time that there is an olive press or a wine press. And then because that season is trustworthy, we believe in Am Haaretz when it comes to Truma during a season of actual pressing of those items, so then he should just wait. So says the Gemara, well, what if I accept the gift? I'm a chaver, you're an Am Haaretz, and you give me this gift. What, do I have to turn you away? Can I be the one who holds the gift and just wait until the season that is a good season that we should trust you? So says the Gemara, let's say the chaver who gets a gift of truma from an Am Haaretz during the off season, mahu sheyanichena legasaba. Can I, the chaver, hold on to that gift in my warehouse? I know I can't drink it until they start pressing olives and grapes, but can I hold it, or does the Am Haaretz have to hold it? So Amar Lahu, we learned this already. Tani Tuha. This brings us to the top of Chav Hamid Beis. We already learned this. Chaver ve'Am Haaretz yarshu asaviyam Am Haaretz. You have two children. One child is a chaver and one child is an Am Haaretz. One is learned, one is less learned. And their father was an Am Haaretz. So let's say they got a Yerusha. Yachol lomar lo. The chaver is allowed to say to his brother who is an Am Haaretz, Tol atachitin shebemakom ploni, v'ani chitin shebemakom ploni. You were given a field of grain, of wheat. You're allowed to say, as a Talmud Chacham, you know the difference. I want the wheat that's dry because it's way less likely to be tameh. And you're an Am Haaretz, you don't care either way. I'd rather get the stuff that I'm allowed to eat, and you keep the stuff that you want to eat. You're allowed to say that without saying, I get the dry chitim and you get the wet. You can just say, generally speaking, I'll take part X. In the back of your mind, you know what you're taking. It's the dry part of the field. And you're giving the marshland to the brother who's not so from. You can also say, Tolata yayin shebemakom ploni, v'ani yayin shebemakom ploni. You get the grapes at the bottom of the valley, and I get the ones that are on the hill because they're less likely to be wet. Aval lo yomar lo. You cannot explicitly tell the Am Haaretz brother tol atalach v'ani yavesh. You cannot do that. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to tell him tol atachitin v'ani soer. You're not allowed to do that. The Tani Allah. What do we learn about this brisa? Is that if in fact when the chaver gets his portion of the Yerusha, some of that food is wet. So then the Gemara says, "Oso chaver sorif halachu meniachas hayavesh." He has to burn the lach. He has to burn that which is moist. But says the Gemara, if you're allowed to wait until the next pressed season, so why did you have to burn it? Amai, why did you burn it? It should be mutter to just wait a little bit. Just wait until the next season when they're pressing it, because then we trust the Am Haaretz. So that's a kasha in our Mishnah. Why would you say that we're just waiting? Obviously, waiting doesn't help all the time, because we see in this brisa that waiting didn't help at all. You still had to burn the food. So says the Gemara, "B'davar she'ein lo gas." Not everything what goes as a season for pressing. So if you have a food, Rashi says we're talking about date beer. This wasn't made by pressing grapes and olives. It was made by just soaking dates and letting them ferment. Whatever the science was, it was. That's how they made it. So there was no season for pressing. So what do you do if you have food from an Am Haaretz and he gives you the food and you're not supposed to take it? You're done. The food's tameh. You have to burn it. All right, what about, there's no pressing season for date beer. There's no pressing season, so you're just done. You can't use the food. You have to burn it. Says the Gemara, fine, maybe there's no pressing, but let's hold the date beer until the regel, because by a regel, we also lower our standard to a degree, because we know that Amei Aratzim are still going to be reasonable in regards to Tumah B'Tar for Korbanos. Says the Gemara, cute, but not everything can last until the next Chag. Let's say that your date beer has a shelf life of 2 weeks. Well, Pesach's not for 6 weeks, 5 weeks. So says the Gemara, "B'davar she'einu mishtamer l'regel." So the Gemara doesn't have a good approach here to try and answer the question we started with, which is the chaver allowed to hold on to that which he is not allowed to eat? Yes or no? The Gemara does not have a clear answer. 12 lines down or so at the 2 dots, Chav Hamid Beis. Let's continue. We had said that if there's an Am Haaretz, we don't always trust him for truma. We only trust him for truma in the season when we're pressing grapes and olives. However, if he adds to the mix, don't worry, I added a revius of kodesh wine or kodesh oil into this barrel, then we trust him. So it's not hasam. We learned this Mishnah. Where did we learn this? In Maseches Psachim, and it's a Mishnah first and foremost in Maseches Oholos. And this Mishnah speaks about a Beis HaPras. A Beis HaPras is a field where a dead body was buried, but we now do not know where it is. So says the Gemara as follows. Tanan Hasam, the Mishnah says, Modin Beis Shammai uBeis Hillel, shebodkin laosei Pesach ve'ein bodkin laochlei truma. That if a person is walking through a field, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree that if there's a risk of there being a dead body in that field, by Pesach we are bodkin, ve'ein bodkin laochlei truma, and we do not do the same bedika for ochlei truma. What does bodkin mean? My bodkin, and we do checking. So says the Gemara. Amar of Yehuda Mar Shmuel, Minapeach Adam Beis HaPras v'holich. What it means is that you have some type of machine where you're like some type of what are those things called? The bellow, the thing that presses air. What's it called? That presses bellows? Yeah, something like that.
What does it do?
You know, like a fireplace, it's that air thing. Bellows.
It's a stick.
It's not a stick.
Bellows.
It's a pouch that blows air.
Looks like a sort of accordion.
It looks like an accordion. It's V-shaped, and when you open it, the bag fills with air. And when you press it, it blows air into the bottom of the fire to make the fire. Correct. We picked up on that when you called it a stick. Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
bonfire, I don't need one of those.
You don't, but for people who have fireplaces, and it's a little harder to. Anyways, that's an example of that. If you're walking through this field and you want to make sure that there are no bones, so you blow the dirt in front of you to make sure that the path that you're on the path that you're walking has no bones. That's what the Gemara says. Let's continue. So that's what the Gemara says. Amar Shmuel menapeach adam beis hapras balach. If you blow the dirt that's right in front of you, one step at a time, it's kind of like cleaning out the field from landmines, halachic ones at least. He says that if you have a beis hapras, a field where you know that a body was buried but you don't know where, but it's been plowed since then, we assume that the body is been ripped to shreds to the point that no tumah can happen, and you can just walk through the field even without blowing the dirt in front of you to see if you can walk through safely. And what is it that Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai agree to? La'osei Pesach, for the ones who are trying to bring a korban Pesach, listen to this. Lo ha'aminu divrei b'makom kares. The Chachamim did not institute their requirement for B'dika when they were dealing with the Isser Kares. It's really a mitzvah asay that has Kares attached to it, which is bringing the Korban Pesach. So because the Korban Pesach had to be brought, and if it wasn't, you'd be Chayiv Kares, we lowered the standard to bring a Korban Pesach through a Beis HaPras. And as well, la'ochle truma, as it relates to eating truma, ha'amidu divrei b'makom isa. There we do institute the Chachamim's guidelines, and you do need to make sure that you're not walking over bones, in which case you'd have to get this bellows and you'd have to blow some air in front of, blow some of the dirt in front of you to make sure that there were no bones there. Ibayalahu, the Gemara asks a great question. Badku lepesach ma'u sheyochal b'trumasa. If in fact you did this careful process of going through the Beis HaPras, and now you made it across, can you walk that same exact path with truma? You already checked it for the Kodesh. You checked it for the Korban Pesach, which is Kachim Kaleb. Can you trust that same path? Every footstep is the same, right? You can see the boot prints. Can I trust that if I was able to get across that field, halachically speaking, because of the fact that I was blowing the dirt in front of me, I know there's no bones. What if truma crossed that same field? That's a machlokas. Ula amar badak lepischo motor lecha b'trumaso. He says that if in fact you did check for your Korban Pesach, no problem with the truma, you can eat it out of that field. Rabbi Bar Ula amar badak lepischo achar lechol b'truma. So, and Rabbi Bar Ula was strict. Amar le'ahu Saba, there was an older gentleman who said to Rabbi Bar Ula, lo tiflo gale de Ula, do not mess with Ula. He is right. How do we know that Ula is right? Titnan kavase, because there's a Mishnah that's just like him. Normally, when we see this language, it's Tanya kavase de Rav so and so, but if you look at how this dialogue happened, the Amoraim used this language. Don't mess with Ula, ditnan kavase. We actually got our language of Tanya kavase de Rav so-and-so from phrases like this in Shas. This was actually what this older gentleman said to Rabbi Bar Ula. Ditnan kavase, there's a Mishnah just like Ula. Ula said that we trust him for Truma. What does our Mishnah say that reflects that? This is our Mishnah that he's quoting. V'im Amar, hifrashti l'sochar, Revi's Kodesh. We trust in Am Haaretz to say that if you put one revis of something holy, of that higher level of Kedusha, into one of the containers, then Mehem and Nami at Truma, we trust him on Truma. Hachanami, here in our case too, about if you can walk through the Beis HaPras and successfully get there with your Korban for Korban Pesach, we also trust him for Truma. Hachanami, Mehem and Pesach, Mehem and Nami at Truma. We trust him as well for the Truma, and then you could walk the same path and eat Truma out of that Beis HaPras. 2/3 of the way down at the 2 dots, we're going to go to the Mishnah at the end of the page, and then we'll stop. We had said in our Mishnah, Kadeh Yain v'Kadeh Shemen. Let's see what the Gemara has to say. We're talking about the barrels. Tana, the Mishnah says, Ein ne'emanin lo ala kankanim v'lo ala truma. We have no trust when it comes to small containers, like small pitchers, not the barrels, but the smaller ones. V'lo ala truma. We don't trust Ami Haaretz for that. Says the Gemara, what kankanim are we talking about? Kankanim demai. What pitchers is the Brisa saying are restricted? Says the Gemara, Ikan kanim de Kodesh. If what you're saying is that we're not allowed to have a pitcher's worth of Kodesh liquid, wine, or oil, that can't be, because our Mishnah says that we trust on Am Haaretz all year round for Kodesh. And therefore, Migu de Mehemen a Kodesh, since we trust the Am Haaretz for that which is a higher level of Kedusha, which is Kodesh, Mehemen nami a kankanim. If you're going to say the contents inside are okay, the Kli has to also be okay. So then when the Brisa says that kankanim are restricted by Am Haaretz, it can't be talking about Kodesh. And Ela kankanim de Truma, and if you want to say that we're talking about smaller containers that are used for Truma, Pshita, that's obvious. Hashta Truma lo mehemen, a kankanim mehemen. If we don't trust the Am Haaretz for the contents of the Truma, we're not going to trust him for the container that's holding it. So what, again, did the Brisa mean to include when it said that an Am Haaretz is not trusted by the pitchers? The Gemara responded, we're not talking about pitchers that have any liquids in them. Ella says the Gemara says, Ella birekonim de kodesh v'shari mos hashana. We're talking about vessels, small pitchers that were used for kodesh throughout the year. Uvimalein de truma v'shas agitos, and pitchers that were full of truma, but it was in the time of the gitos. In these cases, we needed these cases to be added so we could properly understand the brisa. The Gemara says, wait 1 second. Tanami learned in our Mishnah, kade yayin v'kade shemen hamedumos, that in our Mishnah it says that when we have barrels of wine and barrels of oil, and they're meduma. What is meduma? Meduma is a mixture of chulin and kodesh. So says the Gemara, my lab medumas to truma. Aren't we talking about a mixture of chulin and truma? And amre debei Rav Chia medumas de kodesh. No, we're talking about a mixture of other things, not about truma. So you can't ask a kasha in our case. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Mi ika dimu la kodesh. Is there such a thing where you have something that's on such a high level? You're talking about yayin and shemen, which is meant to be used for nisuch on the mizbeach, and for the oil is going to be used in the korbanos mincha. Is there such thing as having dimua, of having a mixture of chulin in there? Says the Gemara, Amr debei Rabbi Lazar b'mitaheres tivlo litlo mimenu nisachim. We're talking here about a very specific case where you have tevel and you're treating it on a very high level where it can be used even for nisuch hayayin on the mizbeach. So we're not talking about a regular case. And in that case, yes, there can be dimua, there can be a mixture of chulin with kodesh. Last little sugya for the night. We had said in our Mishnah that kodem legitos shivim yom, that before we got to the time of pressing for oil and for grapes, that we had to prepare for 70 days to get there. Yeah, remember, we don't have a long window of time, the time of the pressing. And if you're going to trust in Am Haaretz, you got to have stuff in barrels already. So when do you start packing the barrels? The Gemara says 70 days. Kodem legitos shivim yom. Amar Abaye shmamina. What do we learn from here? Dinahu, that there is a halacha, the ilave arisa, it is the burden of the arisa, of the aris, of the sharecropper, of the farmer, limitrach, to work very hard, agulfe, on the barrels and unpacking the barrels, shivim yomin mikame ma'atzarta, before the holiday kicks in. Because again, we have a very narrow window of when we're actually pressing grapes and olives. It seems to be that it's near Atzeres. And we required, it's kind of like, stocking the stores in order to make sure that you have what to use for the holiday. And these are the 70 days just prior to Atzeres. We'll stop right here and pick up Amir Hashem tomorrow night with a new mission on the bottom of Chaf Hey. Wishing you all a beautiful night.